I was in class tonight, and I was in my budget policy class, and the teacher was talking about why we have a budget policy, which is predicated on the idea that we need government, and she was talking about economic reasons we need government. So this is dealing with, in other words, arguing against 7 reasons that were brought up that we need government. So one is asymmetric information. So it's argued that markets require perfect information to properly function, and perfect information does not exist, therefore there's a market failure, so we need government. So asymmetric information is definitely a problem for markets, but I would argue it's a much larger problem for governments, especially centralized governments, even representative democracies. You're saying that a select few of people are going to be able to analyze and allocate these resources on a budget committee better than a market is going to. So, and you know, there's the whole calculation problem for strict communism, but I think you run into degrees of the calculation problem even in something like a representative democracy. And I think although asymmetric information is a problem for markets, it's more of a problem for anything other than a market. Okay, so the second thing was externalities. David Friedman gives good talks on why externalities do not break markets. First of all, you're going to run into externalities even from a government policy. The thing about markets is markets create less biased externalities. That is to say, you're going to have people in government picking winners and losers. There's going to be externalities that benefit those people that the government would like to benefit. With a market, it's unbiased. It's just everybody. Okay, and here's the other thing, is that the externalities argument is predicated on a subjective definition of a victim. And I think this is David Friedman's big counter, although he didn't come up with it. I heard about it from him. So basically, let's say like some people live downriver from a company that is polluting. So they build their house on this river, downriver from a company that's polluting, and you know, it destroys their property value or whatever. You could argue that that's a negative externality for the company on the victim who lives in that house. Or you could say it's the person who built their house there, it's their fault for building there, and they're creating a burden for the company. So it works both ways. The externality argument is predicated on defining one person as the victim, and you know, you take that to government and the government solves everything. Well, a marketplace treats them equally. It's unbiased. And so for that reason, a marketplace can be argued to be better. The third thing was monopolies and natural monopolies. So there's the argument of monopolies and natural monopolies. The first thing I would say is I have never heard of a real example of a natural monopoly. The whole argument for natural monopolies is high barrier to entry in a market. That can be easily overcome through club goods, making it, you know, or investing, making a bunch of people invest, and saving. So if something is creating a lot of revenue, you might have a temporary natural monopoly, but it's not going to be sustained. The fourth thing was public goods. So the argument was that public goods somehow need government, which I totally don't understand. So a public good is a non-excludable, non-rivalrous good. Excludable is if I can prevent you from using it. That's excludable. Rivalrous is if I use it, it affects your use of it. So I don't know what is non-excludable. Like, I think with guns, pretty much anything becomes excludable. But rivalrous, there are some things that are genuinely non-rivalrous, like information may be genuinely non-rivalrous. I don't see why a government is needed for information. You can have computers, you know, you can duplicate software and stuff like that without governments. Intellectual property, protecting intellectual property, that can be enforced through voluntary enforcement agencies. You don't need a government. There's a lot of public goods which can be simply turned into club goods. I would say this. Anything that is considered a public good can also be considered a club good. So you can have a club form to defend each other. You can have a club form to, you know, agree to a set of rules, whatever governments do, build roads. You can have clubs that build roads. heck, with roads, you can even have individuals and so forth building roads. But, things like environmental protections, these can all be done through what are called club goods. A club good, where you have members come together and sort of ration it amongst themselves. Through being a club good rather than a good predicated on a government, it becomes voluntary, and there's a whole lot of good things that happen there. But I also just want to point out that public good does not have to come from a government. Okay, then the fifth one was, and many other reasons. I just want to point out you should always be skeptical whenever someone says, and many other reasons. Don't let that go. Call them out. What are the reasons? Address them one by one. I really haven't heard any good reasons that government is necessary. So the sixth one was not one that she discussed. This is one that I've heard from David and Patrick Friedman, and that is special interests have a motive to work through government. So you can have a concentrated interest to draw out benefit from a dispersed population. That concentrated interest is going to have the increased motive to take various actions to disadvantage the dispersed population. The dispersed population will be so negligibly affected that they won't bother to resist, essentially. And so this is a very good reason why governments exist. And it's not a justification for governments like the other were failed attempts to be justification for governments. Rather, it's an explanation for why government exists. And in fact, it reveals that it's an unjustified system. Oh yeah, the seventh reason was improper allocation and market. So markets improperly allocate resources. My response to this is, where do you get the proper allocation? According to what standard? So markets present an objective standard. Otherwise, you're having to use a subjective standard. I could say that not enough people are buying shoes. Not enough people are buying whatever, crack. It's very arbitrary and subjective. Of course, you're going to hear people say, not enough people are buying vaccines. According to what standard? And they come up with these very subjective standards for what the proper allocation is. And I haven't heard a good one. So I think arguing that markets form an improper allocation is an opinion rather than an actual argument. All right, thanks for watching the response to these 7 supposed reasons for government.
Ready?
Is it going?
I don't know.
Do you even know what you're doing?
Yes, it is going.
All right, you can stop it. Okay. Let me see it. What were you doing? Why were you zooming it?
Because it's funny.
All right, play it.
I'm going. Will you chill? I think we're still recording. How do I stop?
Oh my gosh.
How do I